I'll only swear talking about Tracy's game.
Hi all, welcome to another podcast. In this one, it's a post-Australian Masters recording, and I'm joined in this one by Queensland's own Ken D, who, let's just say, don't take a betting tip off him.
And that's about right.
I'm joined by Karl from Perth, who's originally a UK boy, so that would probably explain why he got to the Masters.
Hello. Yeah, that's it, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. We've got Ken F from Sydney.
Hi, everyone.
And we're joined by Jeff Trashy, who's also from Sydney, who had all the hordes in the world.
That's me. How are you?
So we're here to talk about the Aussie Masters results and how well people got on and how terrible our predictions were. So we'll start with you, Jeff. You managed to get the win. Congratulations. Did you expect that?
No, I didn't. As I said, I thought a couple of lists there were going to give my list quite a bit of trouble, especially Clint Richards with the Night Stalkers. And actually, when we did play, it did give me a lot of problems. I had a very tough game against him. I had a tough game against all of my opponents other than Nick in the first round, because I drew Clint's Night Stalkers, and with the invade scenario, it was quite a comfortable win for me in that one.
Because just looking, I'm assuming when you've got the list of the attrition score, I assume that's similar to the way we run it here, and you've actually got, considering you came first, a really low attrition score. So you must have had some really tough games.
I did, very tough games. All of them were quite close, as I said, other than the first one. One of the things, or the main thing I'd say, is when I'm playing, I'm really concentrating on the scenario win, and I'm more than happy to sacrifice to gain that win. So
I was going to jump in and say exactly that. Tracy always plays the scenario. He plays it better than anybody else around.
Well, it seems to be working for him, that's for sure. It's a solid finish. Well above, Ken, the bridesmaid here, what happened? You've got a massive attrition score, so it looks like you were pretty much kicking everyone in the head for the most part.
Yeah, I had, the big win I had really that gave me most of my attrition score was one game that there was only, I think, 119 the whole tournament, and I got it. And I played Andrew Goodman, and I just had he made a mistake. I got up, and then I just had a magical turn where all the dice went for me as well, and that was a real shut the gate game for him. Outside of that, the others I won relatively okay, and I went down to Tracy, knowing that I was down on scenario and trying to get it back. I ended up losing some troops. I just couldn't pull it back. But yeah, I ended up a mile in front of attrition, but it's all about winning the game, and I just couldn't do it against Tracy.
Actually, yeah, now you say that, looking at the scores, in general, there's only 2 4-figure attrition scores. That's actually, it says it was, on the whole, actually a pretty close tournament throughout. Looking at it, there's not a massive difference.
No easy games. There were no easy games. I mean, Ben was ranked number 9. He pulled Clint in the first round, and he was thinking, I'm going to be in trouble here, but he just missed getting a draw in that game on the last turn. Matt was the 10th ranked player. He ended up coming 4th. Everyone there was a good player, and every game was tough. I think you'd probably agree, Karl.
Yeah, absolutely. Just everything was sort of pretty neck and neck, bar 1 or 2 matchups for 1 or 2 players.
So, Karl, you had the combat goblins, all the combat goblins in the world. How did that work out? It was a bit of a, compared to like Jeff's list, which was all the hordes, you'd kind of went almost the diametric opposite direction.
Yeah, it's what I've been sort of running mostly over the year. So it's evolved into what I want it to be, and I've always enjoyed having lots of units on the table running around doing their own things with pretty much as minimal character support as I can manage. So back when I used to play fantasy, I used to play armies with sub 200 or 300 points in characters, and everyone thought I was insane. And I've transitioned that into Kings of War.
Now, Ken D. Now, we had a long chat about all these lists and made all these predictions. And now, I know you did say you thought Jeff's list was pretty strong, but we didn't have him down for win. In fact, almost everyone we had for the win didn't do nearly as well. What went wrong?
No, I got the top three totally wrong. So, yeah, the shooting Chris's list does depend on terrain and scenario, and was just outplayed. And I don't know what list Chris got in the first.
Chris
he
got
played. Yeah. Chris got Rordia and got Jeff's list, didn't he?
Yeah,
so
against
we pulled the League of Rordia versus League of Rordia game, and I'd played against Tracy, a similar list to what Tracy had, and I knew it was very good, but I knew it was really hard to play, and I knew that Nick's list was a bit more straightforward to play, and I was pretty sure Chris wouldn't have seen either and really wanted Nick's. So I won the roll-off, even though he had the tiebreaker, and I took his list. Then I think a small part of him died right in front of me when I chose that list.
Yeah,
he wasn't impressed.
No, Chris wanted Nick's list. Chris did say he didn't know how to play Jeff's list, but he would know how to play Nick's list.
So yeah, just so on that point, actually, that kind of first round where you did the army swap for the guys up there, how did that affect you? Because that was a bit of an unusual one, I thought, for a Masters.
Well, I've always enjoyed those sort of switch arounds. I've played a lot of Masters in fantasy over the years, and we've done that sort of thing before. And I think it's a great test for players to try different ones. I'm very much like Clint. I've played, I think, about 11 different factions so far in the short time I've been playing Kings of War. So I change continually. So.
I think that the other thing about it in the Masters, there is certainly something in this game about writing a list that plays to your style.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess when you're looking to see who is the best player, not the best list writer, and you've only got 4 games in one day, trying to put an element in where you have to pick up something and play, use a different style, do something different, know how tactics work. I mean, it gives an advantage to the guys who have played more factions, but by the same token, if you're supposed to be the 10 best players running around, you should be able to adjust. So that was because as you guys know, I was the TO as well and wrote the pack. That was the logic behind that decision. And I felt it worked pretty well.
That's not ominous.
Sorry, I've got the baby monitor next to the next to the computer here. Sorry about that.
So the swap one. So it sounds like that was quite a sort of an important one. And looking at some of the scores, there was some quite important matches decided by that one. What was Karl? You had quite an MSU army. So how did you find the terrain affected that? What was the terrain like there? Basically, was it quite heavy?
I think it was. Probably what 10 pieces per board, and they were all very.
We used the
standardised.
maps. We used the maps that are on the Antic Forum for anybody who doesn't know. So we picked 5 maps out of that pack. I can't remember which numbers off the top of my head. But yeah, they were the maps we used. I wanted something standard that everybody'd seen before.
Yeah, the terrain was quite varied. You had a couple of hills, a couple of forests, a couple of impassables, a couple of marshy rivers or something, and a couple of walls on each map. It didn't really bother me too much because the whole army's nimble except the trolls, so you can sort of react on the fly and put units where they need to go rather than getting too badly gummed up.
Yeah, Jeff, on the other hand, because you had the 4 hordes, I have to admit, when I saw that, I thought that's going to be a real tricky one to manoeuvre. How did you find that kind of worked within the terrain?
I don't have a problem with it. I know a lot of people say, how do you handle that number of hordes? And whether there's terrain or no terrain, I know I'm going to get charged 9 times out of 10. So moving up into terrain's not a problem, it's usually a help. And I just keep my line solid, use the flyers to get around the flanks or in behind them. I don't find a problem with it. Keep a solid line. It worked quite well.
So, I suppose the first one then, Ken, jump back to you, Kenny,
Yep.
if that is. What would you say your toughest game was? I'm going to ask you all this question really. What was the toughest game and why, basically?
I think I was confident against Chris because I knew he didn't know how to play Tracy's army, and almost stuffed that one up. I was a mile ahead in the first two turns, and then I just gifted him back about 500 points and tried to make it difficult for myself. So I just made a brain snap. The game against Tracy was the hardest game. It's the only game I lost. The game against AG, I had that magical turn, as I mentioned, and the last game against Clint, I thought I was done in the second turn and pulled it back. So that one was tough too. I was sweating buckets by the end of that game, but I got up in that one. Toughest game was Tracy.
So, Karl, how did you fare overall? Any particular games that you're particularly proud of? When you pulled the one out?
No, I wouldn't say I was particularly proud of any of them. I think the most enjoyable game I had was against Clint's Night Stalkers. Basically, we both brought a ton of combat power, and we actually ended up playing the wrong scenario. We decided to play a second pillage in this one rather than loot, which is a bit silly given we're supposed to be top 10 players in the country, but never mind. And basically, we just ripped each other's faces off for the entire game, and sort of neck and neck right until the end of the game, and then it swung in Clint's favour. But loads of combat all over the place. I think he was a bit taken aback that there was someone there who was prepared to run across the table at him, as opposed to him just running across the table at other people. And,
you probably only list fast enough to do it, really, there, wouldn't you be?
I don't know, the list isn't actually that fast. It moves sideways quite well, but pretty much everything just moves 6 inches. So when the melee is going on, then the units can sort of change position pretty quickly. But getting there, if someone doesn't want to come and fight me, then it's a turn 3 combat.
And Jeff, and how did you fare? What anything that particularly stood out when you were playing any games?
As I said, the first game was against Nick, and I drew Clint's Night Stalkers, and we sort of thought or talked about it before we started and said whoever wins this roll is probably going to win the game. Mm-hmm. So we both felt we didn't have a chance with the scenario and the one we were going up against, and I was lucky enough to win the roll for it. It was up against the Empire of Dust, I think. Mm-hmm. And they just didn't have the mobility to keep up with it. I still had to be careful when I played, but as long as I kept it fairly controlled, I didn't think I could lose that one. The other 3 matches, every one of them was tough. I didn't have an easy game. Probably the toughest was Clint. He was on top in the attrition and winning the battle. And I was able to shut him out on the scenario on the last turn, which he didn't see coming, and I sacrificed a couple of units and was able to get the win. Ken's brother, Evan, very tough match again. He ran out of time, and that sealed it for him. And
that was painful. It was up too.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. It was tough on him. Very, very tough match, that one. And with Ken, I've played Ken more than any other person. So, it was a battle royale as usual.
So, Ken D, what happened to the Queensland contingent? You big up them. There was a lot of big up, and I saw the video.
I know. I've got nothing. Clint's in a really bad patch. It's not Clint. He's losing left, right, and centre at the minute. So he needs to get back on form, ready for Cam. He's trying different lists, and he's lost his mojo. Chris, the first game through Chris. Second game, I think the second game was loot, and he lost the scenario, but I believe he was well up on attrition. I think it turned out like a 12-8 win or a 13-7. And then he took his last 2 games. He did quite well in his last 2 games, Chris. But yeah, that first game, he was desperate for the list he didn't get. he was desperate to use Nick's list. So yeah, got it totally wrong. I've got no idea what happened to Andrew Goodman. I've not heard there. That was a bit big of a shot. He was down in 7th or something, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's second last. Yeah,
9th.
He came 9th. So he was after 2 games. He was coming. He played me. I think we were 3rd and 4th in that game. In game 3. So in 2 games, he was 3rd or 4th. He was relatively near the top because only one player won their first 2 games. But then he lost that game 3 big, and he lost the 4th game too. I can't try and check who it was too. And then he played Chris in the last round and got done by Chris Wilcox in that 4th round too. So he just had 2, the opposite of Chris Wilcox, I guess. He had 2 losses at the end instead of 2 wins. If that makes sense.
The big problem with these sort of tournaments too is that it doesn't matter whether you're fighting on the top table or the 5th table. It can be just as bad. It really can. Just as tough. So.
And as far as Queensland Ken's predictions go, Clinton Ken D came down to Newcastle and played, but they didn't play myself, Ev, or Tracy, who were the top 3 New South Wales players. We weren't able to make that tournament. So I think they are a little bit overconfident on the standard down here. And it's a different meta too. Like they're used to the style they play up in Queensland too. So when you're coming down and encounter some different armies, I think that's why Tracy beat Clint. He just wasn't expecting someone to play so purely for the scenario.
Yeah, I have to admit, personally, you know, almost everyone, I think the standard is you kind of spend 3 or 4 turns fighting and then sort of concentrating the scenario. It's very unusual for someone to come straight out the door and focus on the scenario from turn 1.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I focus on the scenario from turn 1, although I do in a sense, but I very much watch out. Once I'm hitting turn 4 or 5, I make that the number 1 priority.
So, Karl, is there anything you'd like to see done differently for next year? Anything you'd like to see changed up or in the way the tournament was played?
Not particularly. I mean, 2 days would obviously be very nice, but we need sort of more players, I think, to make that worthwhile. But no, generally, I was very happy with it. I think one of the things we discussed in the thread on Wargamer AU was perhaps having an army swap in round 1 rather than random armies paired up on the tables. I think that would be quite interesting. But besides that minor tweak, then no, not really.
And what about you, Jeff?
I'd probably like to see a few more players, maybe up to 16. Bigger field would always be good. But everything else was great, the way it was run. The terrain was good. The players were great. I couldn't fault it in any spot.
And Ken, since you were the TO, of course, you've probably got a slightly different viewpoint to some degree.
I was waiting for someone to say the TO was a bit dodgy. But as the person who organises it, I'd love to have 16 players, 7 games, 2 days, but I don't want to have people passing down invitations beyond the top 20. And we got down to, I think, the 19th ranked person. Matt auto-qualified, so he was out, but he auto-qualified, and that's fine. But it loses the quality of the tournament if you're going down much further down, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We would have had that covered if we would have held it in Queensland, but given it was the first time and I wanted to run it in my own backyard just because I would be able to get the venue and all those dramas, but we're almost certainly going to hold in Queensland next year because they deserve it with their participation numbers and the quality of their field up there.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably go from, I'm happy to talk with people about it as well, but I'm thinking the scene is nowhere near that. Like we had a 16-player fantasy masters when we were getting, 50 people to 4 or 5 events a year, 100 players to 1 or 2. We had a CanCon once, I think, that had a DogCon that had 190 players. So we're nowhere near the numbers that can really justify such an exclusive at 16, in my opinion. We'll probably go to 12, I would imagine, next year. And if that goes well and we get good participation, then we might creep up and see how we go. That said, if I get overwhelmed with people saying, we'll spend the money, we'll get there, then that's great. Because you've got to expect not everybody can make it. Not everybody can justify spending the money to fly to play Toy Soldiers on a weekend when you've got families and children and all those sort of things. So I've got to keep that in mind too.
Yeah, especially with the distances you're talking in Australia, it's the one. Must be one of the major problems you have organising any kind of tournament there.
Well, we make jokes about Western Australia, and Karl coming over was just tremendous. But we're making jokes that they're very big fish in a very, very small pond because they're just so far away. I mean, it's not quite true, of course, because Karl came to CanCon and did well there. But it's a long way. So you've got to have people flying. People just can't drive the distances.
Yeah, to put it in perspective for anyone listening from elsewhere in the world, to get from Perth to probably Melbourne is about a 3-day drive, and you have to cross a desert to do that. So you need a pretty competent car.
I guess the way we put it is Perth to Sydney is only about 100k less than LA to New York.
That's put it in perspective. That's quite one hell of a journey for some Toy Soldiers. I have to admit, I kind of, if I'm going more than 2 hours, it has to, I'm getting a hotel. I'm not driving any further. So that's quite a big one.
Yeah. So Karl paid the money, accommodation, all that sort of stuff. We only had I think Ben drove up on the day. He had to drive about 200k. Then there were the 3 of us from New South Wales, or 4 of us with Nick, and then everybody else had to fly and pay for accommodation, do all those sort of things as well. So I've got to be mindful of that in organising the Masters here in Australia.
So, Jeff, after this victory now, what's next? Only ways down, probably?
I've been playing for a long time, so I'm not too worried if I don't get first in a tournament. As long as I'm there playing, that's the main thing for me. I've actually been pulling out the Kingdoms of Men recently and really enjoying them. So that'll be my next one at the moment.
The next Stealth Filth then. I'll be interested to see how you do with them, because Kingdoms Men's one I keep looking at, but they seem a little bit dull. But then again, I would have said the same about League of Rhodia, and you've done really well with them, so be curious to see how you get on.
Yeah, well, they're cheap units. You can get a lot of them. And I always like to try and get a little bit of a challenge to what I'm doing. So I'll still use some of the stronger lists, but I tend to steer away from them and try some of the others and try and come up with new ideas that people haven't come up with before and see how that goes. But yeah, really enjoying them at the moment. But I enjoy all the factions. So.
And what about you, Ken, then? Plans for next year? Plans to win yourself the Masters next year? What army do you think you'll be going with?
I'd like to go one better, but everybody might cry foul if the TO wins the event. I think I'd said to Tracy and my bro after the event too, we're going to have to play really well at CanCon because everybody's going to be there. There's going to be 50-odd players that I don't think anyone expected Evan and myself to be up there. I picked Tracy to win before the tournament, but I don't think anyone else expected the rest of us to be there. I'll be playing Varangar next year. I've been trying to find the best balance of their elite units and finding some way to make sure they get in. If they get the first charge off, then they'll smash everything, because even they'll pop a hit back, they'll hit. They basically kill everything they touch. So I'm trying to find the best way to pull that off at the moment. It's always hard too because my practice is always against Tracy and Evan. So theoretically, I play the the two other best players running around. So if something doesn't work and I lose, I throw it away, and it might actually be a good idea. And they're just better. I don't know.
What about you, Karl? What are you thinking for next year?
So I'll still be playing the goblins a fair bit, I think, because I actually use them as my Tyranid army, which is what got me into wargaming in the first place. So there's a bit of a first love going on there, so they're never going anywhere. But I'm also experimenting with Ratkin and Twilight Kin, particularly liking the Twilight Kin because it's something so different to the goblins. I'm fielding big hordes of infantry with high nerve, and lower abyssals have fury, and lower abyssals with fury and Bane Chant is quite wonderful.
They're a great list, Twilight Kin.
Yeah, they've got a lot of flexibility in there. They've got the chaff, they've got the hitting power, they've got units with variable movement rates, which is a bit of a novelty for me.
And the shooting too. They've got you can run the elf archers with the piercing plus the demon based stuff, or the cav. Like there's so many options there.
Yeah, it's been really really surprising actually how much harder the archers with piercing hit than the overshooters. The change between 18 to 20 attacks and 20 hitting on 4s and then re-rolling your 1s. They've been doing some pretty horrible things in the game so far.
I wanted to know what you're predicting because I didn't hear the podcast on the predictions.
I think I had Clint down for the win. I think because I like Clint's list.
As well.
Yeah,
I had Clint down for the win. Yeah.
Yeah, we figured it was, I think, either going to be like Clint or Chris. I think were the two we thought had the most powerful lists.
The funniest thing about it, we had the tournament the day before the campaign tourney, Fortunes of War, and Clint played a Night Stalker list that was a little bit different. Only had 3 of the fiends, and he had 2 of those. I forget what they called the hordes of large infantry.
But he took butchers. He swapped out 2 fiends for 2 butchers.
Yes. And that list was.
He regretted not taking that the second day.
And just having that option, I mean the fiends look worse on paper, but that army was heaps better with the 2 butchers instead. And I was running that event as well, but I wasn't playing, and I just said to him, "This army's better than the army you got tomorrow." And he said, "Yeah, I know." Yeah, I'm glad he didn't have that when I played him.
I still would have, if you'd asked me for a prediction, I would have put Clint at the top. I thought his list was the strongest one there.
Well, if you're listening, Clint, there you go. You've let everyone down.
Clint played really well. Very, very tough game against him.
Myself as well. As I said, turn 2, he took 3 of my units off the board, and I just sat there when I've lost this. There's no way I can come back. And then I came back, so I was happy about that.
That's the truth. So it's one thing I'll say to Kings is never admit defeat. The amount of times I've been battering my opponent left, right, and centre and been in complete control, and then in the last turn lost the game because I've just done a chump move or they've just seen a thing I hadn't noticed. It happens all the time.
Yeah, or the dice turn completely, and a couple of double 1s will ruin your day.
Well, thanks very much, guys. I've actually got this is quite a good one. I've actually got a podcast finished remotely on time and not turned into an hour-long extravaganza. So thank you, Ken D, Karl, Ken F, and Jeff for coming along. And I'll definitely sort of keep in touch with you around how things are going in Australia over the next year, and see how you're getting on.
No, absolutely.
We can do
We'll continue to listen to your podcast too. I've listened to all of them so far. So
thank you very much. Glad someone is. Well, thanks everyone. Hope that was everyone listening enjoyed that one. Usual like, share, comment stuff. All right, have fun. Catch you all later.